Hello again. I can't help but find something odd about the amount that we are reading in our newspapers over the last few years about viruses and vaccines to combat them. Of course, there have always been outbreaks of influenza and so on, and prudent old people get themselves vaccinated in the autumn against the latest strain of flu. Since the arrival of COVID, though, viruses and vaccines seem to have become a staple of the news. 6 weeks ago, we were told that traces of polio had been found at a sewage plant in East London. This was portrayed as a rogue event, just somebody who had had the oral polio vaccine, no longer used in Britain, in some foreign country, and had now excreted traces of it in their poo. In the description to this video, I give a link to a news item from June the 22nd, in which we are told that it is thought someone vaccinated with the live polio vaccine, which uses a weakened version of the virus, abroad, travelled to the UK and shed parts of the pathogen in their stool. But health officials insist the risk to the public overall is extremely low, with urgent investigations now underway to find anyone who has been infected. Note that this is about someone, that's a single person. All the implications were, at the end of June, that this was a single person who had returned from abroad and had had a vaccination there, and that this was just one of those freakishly rare events. I cannot help but notice that this is precisely the way that the first monkeypox case in this country was reported 3 months ago at the beginning of May. Just an unusual event limited to a single traveller from a foreign country. Before we knew it, this had turned into an epidemic, with thousands of cases being identified in Britain. The polio business now seems to be following the same trajectory. In June, it was an isolated case of a single person in East London. Things, though, have changed dramatically since then. Also in the description to this video, I give a link to an item a few hours ago from the BBC website. We are now told that the virus has turned up in samples from 8 London boroughs, namely Barnet, Brent, Camden, Enfield, Hackney, Haringey, Islington and Waltham Forest. The United Kingdom Health Security Agency says genetic analysis of the samples suggests that spread of the virus has gone beyond the close network of a few individuals. Let's just stop for a moment and think about this. 6 weeks ago, the idea was that a single person had returned from abroad, probably from West Africa, where he or she had been vaccinated against poliomyelitis with an oral vaccine. Then this person came back to Britain and traces of the disease, oral vaccines used attenuated live viruses, was found in sewage. We are now told that the polio virus is being found across half of London, and as a result an urgent programme of vaccination of children needs to take place. There is no explanation offered here about what is going on. Obviously the single person arriving from abroad theory has been dropped, and now the talk is about the danger of low rates of vaccination for polio among children. You see the change there. On the one hand, you have a single freak incident of one person arriving from abroad and then excreting polio vaccine. Now we're being told that this is symptomatic of the fact that vaccination rates are very low all over London, and that has become the focus of the business. I ought to mention that I'm not an anti-vaxxer, quite the opposite. I remember when polio was killing many children in this country before the vaccine was introduced in the 1950s. 10% of those who catch this disease will die of it, which is an appalling death rate, far higher than any infectious disease we currently have in Britain. In 1947, there were 8,000 cases of polio in this country, resulting in almost 1,000 deaths, and many children being crippled. As late as 1960, there were 80 deaths from polio in Britain. I, for one, am very glad that there is a vaccine for this terrible disease. That does not mean, though, that I am blind when it comes to odd circumstances surrounding vaccines. The business with monkeypox suddenly taking off in this country was very odd. And the way that it was suddenly discovered that huge stockpiles of almost out-of-date smallpox vaccine would be able to be used to combat the epidemic was also curious. The way in which the story about polio has abruptly changed with no explanation is also very odd. And even odder, and to me a little disturbing, is the way in which we now casually accept the existence of a body called the United Kingdom Health Security Agency, without asking how it is that this arm of the government is now regularly being quoted in newspapers and on television. It has become an important government body. It used to be called Public Health England, and we hardly heard about it from one year to the next. In 2020 it was beefed up, given extra powers, and now we are seeing it mentioned at every touch and turn. I can't help thinking that viruses are something to which attention is being particularly drawn lately, and whether the aim is to keep us on edge and fearing that the next pandemic may soon be upon us, or possibly for another reason, I can't say. I suppose that it might just be empire building by a new government body, a desire by those working for the United Kingdom Health Security Agency for extra funding and prestige. After all, it's good to always be in the news in this way, I suppose, and getting your name mentioned in the papers and your photograph. I honestly don't understand why monkeypox and now polio have both erupted in this way into major incidents, and I do think there's more to it than at first meets the eye.